The public sector isn't working. Following a report by the excellent social mobility group, the Sutton Trust, it seems that private tutoring is now adding to the class and socio-economic divide. Here is the devastating verdict of educational author and consultant Joe Nutt, who said this week, people are flooding to pay for private tutoring and mentoring because between them, the teaching unions and the state demonstrated just how disinterested in and incapable they are of educating children during the pandemic. More and more parents now know this. But it's not just education. Faced with a waiting list of 7 million people thanks to the delightful policy of lockdowns, members of the public are now dipping into savings and even borrowing money to have operations the NHS say are non-urgent or will have to wait. Well, if it's affecting your work or your quality of life, it sounds pretty urgent to me. So the public are resorting to the private sector and therefore effectively paying twice for the treatment that they need. Some neighbourhoods are now employing private police forces because there just aren't enough bobbies on the beat to keep the area safe. The list goes on. Expensively tasked with providing public services, the public sector is all too often not delivering bang for its massive buck. And I fear for the relationship between citizen and state, which has already had a kicking during the pandemic, thanks to the government's illiberal COVID response. Whether it's our health service, policing or education, I worry that these once great institutions will become like the BBC, something we all have to pay for, but which only a portion of the population actually use. The size of the state is enormous, inflated, of course, by COVID. That set the tone, the template for a bloated government responsible for every aspect of your life, costing you a small fortune with the second highest taxes since the war. All for a service which gets more expensive but worse by the day. The cost goes up, the quality goes down. The public sector isn't working. I want my money back. Now, what do you think? Many would argue that the public sector has suffered decades of underinvestment and the chickens came home to roost during the pandemic. Many in education and the NHS argue that poor pay means that recruitment and even hanging on to staff is all but impossible. So is it down to lack of investment or is there a structural issue at play? Mark at GBNews.uk